Hey, welcome. What's up, jerks? Just in the green room talking to I guess what do we call this thing? The trifecta? Mazza Media is now calling himself Ed McMahon. That would make me Johnny. I don't think I'm as good as Johnny. Yeah, but he might, Mazza Media, though, might be as good as Ed McMahon. We got him. Everyone's here. Let's bring him up. We got Mazza Media, and we got the guy everyone's waiting for, Attorney Mark Bederow. Welcome back, guys.
What's going on? Good evening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Nice
what did you think about today?
Just another day in lunchbox land.
I was going to quote Adam Lally for the first time in my life and just say, Jesus Christ.
Who, if anyone, what, if anything?
Yeah, Brian Barrea the other night said it's going to be the jury verdict is going to be WTF. It's going to be a new type of verdict, just WTF.
Could be. Sleepy day today.
Yeah, it was hard to keep up, but we found out a lot, didn't we? I mean, we did find out about items of clothing. We found out that things weren't embedded in bumpers. We found out some information, which was
here that can stay on a vehicle and then magically move and never fall off, and it's just it's incredible.
Yeah, no, you learned a lot. You learned how when they searched the scene, that you got confirmation that the crime scene was basically unattended for about 7 hours, as we had talked about previously. And they had to, or Yannetti had to extract a tooth basically from the lieutenant to finally get him to acknowledge that that's not the preferable way to do a search. It had Tully's fingerprints setting it up all over it, who is with basically a proxy for Proctor. You had them wait several hours to search it in the daylight hours, and why search in daylight? Hold it off. We can do it at night when it's harder to see. And then you had a very bizarre situation where apparently Brian Albert came out of the house and said, "Are you guys here to do the search or whatnot?" Went back in, satisfied, who knows. And then they find all of these pieces of glass, which again are, I think we've talked about this before, hard to explain in light of the materials and whatnot. And so that search, I don't know what to make of it. I don't think it's a very reliable search. We tweeted about this earlier. Anytime the crime scene is compromised and the individuals involved are compromised in some sense, I don't know how you would have any confidence in what's being found at the crime scene. So I think that didn't necessarily go so well. And then this Hartnett, who seemed honest enough, she seems, I mean, maybe she's not the best or the brightest and best in her profession based upon some struggles that she's had, but she certainly seems professional enough. And then if you can stay awake for long enough and you start thinking about what you're hearing, you learned that, if I understood this correctly, she found no blood on the car at all, any human tissue. She found a hair, which she opined was a human hair, I think she said. But I also think she said in the beginning that the proficiency test that she failed was in the identification of hair. If I'm wrong, someone can correct me on that. And then apparently the hair moved while it was on the car in the Sally Port in the span of, I don't know, a few minutes, but it apparently did not move on an approximately 100-mile journey, counting for both ways, in a blizzard with wind, either on the back of a tow truck or
flying with wings.
A magic hair, only in Canton.
And then, of course, you had that piece of glass which is lying flat. And I guess if there had been a lot of glass, maybe every piece doesn't come and go and fly off, but like one piece like that lying flat, again, for a journey of that long, that it's in the Sally Port, where presumably the car was unaccounted for with Proctor, perhaps for a period of time. And if that's not bad enough, then you get to the solo cups, where she said, I had a choice of 1 and 6 and just kind of eeny, meeny, miny, mode, picked one. but then didn't do anything with it, never tested it. So there apparently is no,
Well,
anything.
it did. It's funny because practically they didn't test. It seemed like she did do a test to determine it was blood, which is
Right.
like, well,
But
who gives a shit about that?
wouldn't
We
it
already
be,
know it's blood.
wouldn't it
Like,
be nice to know whose blood?
yeah, exactly.
Or possibly more than one person, depending on
Exactly. They
where they
didn't look at the DNA.
and then so you think that's bad enough, and then you get to the end and you realize that the chain of custody in this case for John O'Keefe's clothes and the blood evidence and everything else, and maybe you want to even relate this to the dog DNA and all of that stuff that never went anywhere, but the chain of custody for the first 6 weeks of the case was what, the back seat of Proctor's cruiser. I mean, he had, there's no chain of custody for evidence that he seized on January 29th until he handed it over to Hartnett or her department until March 14th.
She doesn't even know.
That is absolutely bonkers beyond belief. So I mean, the science in this case is just gone. And then the last thing that I found interesting when I was dozing back in, again, I kind of go in and out with this, but when you were looking at John O'Keefe's shirt, I think when they were showing us every single angle, it's important to have 10 pictures just moving 1 inch at a time over. But when we saw the front of the shirt, I believe it was the front of the shirt, not the back, that appeared to be covered in blood. And that's hard to comprehend when the bloody injury in this case is on the back of his head. And presumably that's their theory about the point of impact, which makes the problem, how is all this blood on the front of the shirt? And then you start to wonder, could there be another way that, you might get blood on the front of your shirt? And as you know, if you get in fights and things like that, you could get blood on the front of the shirt. So those were like the first things that jumped out. And I wrote down, there was something else that just kind of jumped out.
And you know what else you could get it? A thing that I noticed that I thought was one of the most interesting things today. The dog bites. That doesn't go away. It continues to be a focus because the shirt looked what I've seen when I've been bitten. I'm a dog professional.
Has
Been
those
bitten with
little-
clothing. Look
Yeah.
like dog bites to me. You see the tooth. There
Dog
was
bite.
one that you could see the 2 teeth. You could see it. It was
Yeah.
like, that looks like dog bites.
Oh,
So
yeah.
maybe the blood came from dog bites too.
The last thing I thought was interesting today, because they spent a lot of time showing you the taillight and the condition it was in the Sally port before they took it off. And I'm not an expert on cars or anything, but you could see that part of what's missing is that kind of wraparound light on the right side, that it ought to be red on the side of the car and wrap around to have some red on the back. And so that appears to be gone. But then you get back to that video, the Ring camera video, after Karen left John O'Keefe's house at 5 or whatever time it was, 5:07, 5 o'clock, whatever it is. And when you look at that picture, you can see the red wraparound. Now, I can't tell you it's all there. I don't know, but it's a lot more there than appears to be in the Sally port. So that's going to be tough for them. One thing that I think, in all fairness, though, you have to put to bed is the belt, right? I mean, I think the belt, for whatever reason, was always on the pants. Maybe they don't do good record keeping. Maybe that this is, for some reason, again, Proctor doesn't keep proper records, or the vouchering, whatever. But I would put the belt away. That sounded like an interesting issue, but you have to be fair to the evidence, whether it's good or bad. And the
Exactly.
belt,
And the shoes too. Like now we know that one shoe was found at the hospital. One shoe was recovered at the scene, I guess. So
I feel like we had always known there were 2 shoes recovered.
yeah,
At some
we
point.
did, but I don't think we knew the details of how, because there was a mystery at one point about that. People were talking about it, but
But I would
we
say
know all the details of it now, which is good.
what I would say about the belt is, it's a minor win for the DA. So tip your hat, good for you. But that's shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. That's not going to do that much for them. I mean, it certainly takes away an argument that they might not have been able to account for about how a belt could fly off in a car accident, but it just kind of, poo-poos it to the side. They still have all these other problems to go. And once again, I thought they did a wonderful job today, that they are really wrapping this all around Proctor, and they're mentioning his name at will and more and more. And the pressure for the DA to do something with him one way or the other is going to be immense. And I'm actually starting to think that I wonder if there's a way in which they're not, meaning the defense, not going to call Proctor if the DA doesn't, and try to get some of that important evidence in through another party, and then just clobber the DA and say, you never heard from Proctor, you never heard from Proctor, and get those text messages out from another source. I'm wondering if they're going to do that at this point.
I got a question about Proctor. Actually, someone, Fu Mama, she wants to know if we think the feds have Proctor's GPS data from when he was supposed to be at 34 Fairview finding glass and plastic.
I don't know, but if you buy into the theory that he was, throwing red plastic all over the lawn and kicking some snow on it and all of that, he's clearly not the brightest bulb based on a lot of things, such as texting his friends about looking for nudes and that kind of stuff. But you'd have to think that his level of intelligence is somewhere between, dog and cat. If he would have driven his work car with that data in there, knowing that could easily be tracked and traced. So
I definitely know dog's smarter than that.
Right. So I don't know, but I don't think he would have done that with his work car if he in fact did that.
Who's smarter, Coffindaffer or Proctor?
That's kind of a push.
It's a push. It's even money, people. Even money.
The problem with her, and I kind of commented on one of her things today, is she ought to know better as an FBI agent that you can't just accept what somebody says because you like it and then run around and say that's proof, therefore it's infallible evidence, it's perfect, it's unimpeachable. She never does any analysis of considering what you're hearing by comparing it to the witness's credibility. Is it corroborated by other evidence? Does it relate to other things? How does it fit in given the state of the credible evidence or not? She just takes what she considers a good fact and runs with it. So when you have a state trooper come in and say that, oh, I found 3 pieces of taillight, to her, that's it. That's it. You see, the cops found the taillight. There's no deeper thought. I mean, look, the reality is she's kind of a simpleton, right? It's just, it's like a base level analysis without peeling the onion back and thinking about it. You might, if you thought about it more critically, it could be true. I mean, you can't just assume the cops are corrupt in any particular situation. But when you sit there and you say, why did they hold off? Why were they being told, don't go, don't go? Why were there guys apparently from other police units that they didn't even know who were part of this search? What is this thing about Brian Albert coming in to check out, what are you guys here for? Making sure all of the other problems, the unaccounted for time in the Sally Port, you can't just assume that given everything else that's going on in the case, that it has to be true. And then, he was a little inconsistent on cross about where the stuff was located. I don't think that's the biggest deal in the world, to be honest with you. I don't think he was a typically terrible witness, but the bottom line is he was sent there by Tully and Proctor, and he was told what he was looking for, and he was told the general area of where it might be. And that's not standing alone any reason to assume it's a bad search, but knowing what else and Tully says, why don't you go look over here, and what you're looking for are some red pieces of taillight and a sneaker, and then wouldn't you know it, look what he found. So I don't think he moved the needle much for the DA. At least, hey, give them credit for presenting evidence related to the murder charge today. So, they get that.
They did something.
They did something.
Mazda, you have anything on that or anything else that you want to open up with tonight?
I got plenty on this. I got a plenty on everything. This this whole case is just a bigger joke as it goes on. I mean, you just can't you can't even walk out of a day of this trial without this case being a bigger joke than it was an hour or two before. You got this guy, Massachusetts State Police Officer Kevin O'Hara, who said that John O'Keefe was hit and dragged. Hit and dragged. Well, let me ask you a question, Kevin. If this is true, then where are all the leg wounds? Well, where are all his wounds to his legs or torso or hips, ass? None of that. There's none of that at all. There's no back. There's no nothing. There's no shoulders. It's just the back of his head, his eyes, his hands, and a missing shoe, and that's about it. This is, I mean, just to hear that he was hit and dragged by what? A plow driver? He didn't. I don't know if he said that, but I'm sitting here listening to this guy hit and dragged.
I think
He had a
he's
Nike.
attributing that to Tully. In other words, he's saying, you know, he wouldn't give him up, but he was saying that Tully told me what happened. And I think the point the defense was making that comes from the Tully Proctor people telling him that. I mean, the guy who testified would have no knowledge, obviously, because he wasn't there until days later or a day later, whatever it was.
So yeah, exactly. So either way, they're saying that he was hit and dragged, and that's just like, where does that line up with the injuries at all? It doesn't. It's again
No.
another case of not
No.
lining up at all. The taillight. They're showing all kinds of pictures of taillight during Kevin O'Hara today. Does any of this taillight that they're showing, that Adam Lally was showing today, does that match any taillight that was actually a part of Karen Reed's vehicle? There's really no way of telling that, is there? We can't tell if that's really taillight from her vehicle or not, or was it shattered or planted at a later time. Later in the case today or trial today, Ashley Valliere, Adam Lally showing her numerous pictures of taillight all afternoon, all evening long, nonstop pictures of taillight. And again, what's interesting to me, and this is the thought I had, was he presents all this taillight, almost all of which are never seen in any photos that are actually taken at the crime scene, and properly matched with photos that they're showing that were taken in those pictures, for example, right? So you go, okay, here's pictures of taillight in the snow at 34 Fairview, and here's pictures that were we had taken back in the lab here and took photos of, but yet there's never any images showing the photo and the taillight in the snow and the taillight having its picture taken in a forensic lab or crime lab, whatever you want to call it. There's nothing ever matching that up. And even if so, these photos, even if these photos exist of a piece of taillight, any single piece of taillight, I'd say, being in the same spot, they can't be trusted because this whole thing's a blatant cover up. You don't clear a crime scene and then find an abundance of additional evidence in the time frame that follows, which is exactly what happened here. You have a crime scene that was cleared. Okay, it's good, nothing more to see here. Then basically, it's like someone hit a pinata at some point in that front yard, and taillight came out everywhere. It's absolutely absurd, and it's not convincing of anything that this, you know, it's only indicative of a cover up. There's no case to be made to the jury to say that Karen Reed is guilty. There's only basically questions about this whole process. It doesn't make much sense. It's inconsistent, and it's absolutely absurd.
The other problem potentially, I mean, that was a little surprising today, is that the so-called forensic evidence on the car is really beyond the taillight pieces that you just talked about. It's kind of landing with another dud. You were told there's no blood, there's no human tissue, there's no DNA. Well, that's okay. And well, there's a hair that was found by a criminalist who doesn't have the best exam results, whatever, who opines that it's a human hair, but it's a human hair that literally appears to move in her presence. I mean, unless that's a reverse camera angle, which I don't think it is, that hair is it's
moving
facing this way, and then it's facing. I mean, it switches.
Maybe it's a UFO.
I don't know.
Could be an extra dimensional movement.
So
maybe bring Kevin in. That's where we should bring Yellow Cottage Tales, and he could probably get someone from the third portal to explain that to us.
Someone in the comments said there's no cover up. I beg to differ with you, sir.
The problem, though, if they don't have anything linking John O'Keefe to the car, as opposed to the taillight and whatever, the problem they have is that there is a video of her bumping another car which could cause, something, or as
John O'Keefe's
Jackson,
vehicle. Yeah.
or as Jackson established, not necessarily related to the taillight, but the other stuff. The car wasn't off the showroom floor. It looked like it was in pretty good condition, but it was a gently used car, and it might have some nicks here and there. And, she wasn't going to address that, whatever. She's a scientist. I get it. But the point is, there's another car accident that can explain potentially some of this, again, with a burden of proof that the DA has. They're going to have to get past that. And there's apparently nothing forensically that puts John O'Keefe on the car, whether it be the bumper, the taillight, anywhere else. I mean, that was kind of a big deal, I thought, today. And if the idea is that we found some assorted glass, are they going to now tell us? I didn't see the last witness, in all honesty, so I didn't have time. I had my own stuff today. But are they going to link that piece of glass allegedly to the glass on the lawn? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So
there's a nothing burger today. I couldn't believe it when they went through all this process to determine it was blood, but no DNA. That just tells you everything about the state police. It's like, this is a cop that's dead on a lawn. Like, what are you doing?
Nothing apparently, but this was supposed to be the kind of evidence that in a case like this is supposed to be the good stuff. And you almost start to wonder, is this why they started with all the people in the house and did the case upside down? I mean, they still should have done that way, but to sit here again and have them present or start to present the car evidence, it's kind of landing with a dud. Certainly no smoking guns, nothing like that. They go through this. They still haven't called Proctor. At this point, I don't know that they will, but they still haven't called any of these critical state police people. They still haven't called a medical examiner. They call a woman today to say that there's all this, apparently blood in these cups. And I tested it, but I didn't test it for DNA. And then we just kind of and gave it back to some Canton cop to do whatever they're going to do with it. And you start to really ask yourself, how can they possibly have made the decision to go forward knowing that, and this is what I was talking about before, how do you indict? How do you try the case? This is no surprise to Lally. None of this is new. This is new to the people like us who are just watching, but they've known what the evidence is all the time. They know what the defense has known for a lesser period of time because they didn't share any of it or a lot of this evidence for a great period of time. They knew the defense got all that evidence from the feds, which was only going to help them dramatically. And yet here they are running headfirst into the brick wall saying, let's try the case and we will easily prove her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I mean, this is
not happening.
I don't know what the hell these people are doing. And it's getting worse and it should be getting better. It's not getting better. I mean, maybe you can argue they've kind of flatlined and they're just going, but nothing they're doing is making any of this better. I mean, they should have had a great effect today when you find taillight on the lawn or the street. I mean, in the regular case, you would say that's game over evidence. And when you're watching this case, you're just scratching your head and you're saying, let me get this straight. So they got this 7 hours after the crime scene was abandoned. They then call in these people, Tully, and then they sit around for a few hours and they're literally told, don't go in yet, don't go in yet. And then they get there and out comes Albert and Tully says, let's look over here because that's where the stuff is going to be. And that's where it is within an hour in, 18 inches of snow. Maybe, right. But, given everything else you know about this case, that's not as powerful as it should be.
Now, there's been some Twitter statements came out about Alan Jackson gave today, a couple statements he gave. He said that it's only going to take them, I thought he said a couple weeks. This person says 4 days, but he's basically saying that they're not going to do a long extended defense.
That's because I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
You just mentioned Proctor. Proctor might not testify. We thought he might testify for the defense, maybe not for the prosecution. I mean, he may not be called at all, right? I mean, you said that in the backstage.
Maybe. I mean, as far as 4 days, I would say this is what real lawyers do. They read the room, they assess the trial, they look at the jury. That also to me is a tell. I mean, I don't see the jury, you don't see the jury, but they do. And I wonder if they're starting to get a lot of eye rolling, a lot of sleepy heads, a lot of people who are checked out. And if they're checking out, that's a terrible sign for the DA. And if they can get their key evidence in and just kind of streamline the whole process, get in and get out, I think a jury will pay attention, just like in the openings. Think of it the exact same thing. Lally drones on for a couple of hours of nothing and they do theirs. Everyone pays attention. They get their evidence out and they sit down. As far as Proctor, I'm starting to think that he won't testify for the prosecution at all. And then it occurred to me when you said maybe they're going to do this in 4 days, I could see a situation where they don't call Proctor if they feel they can get certain evidence in. They've got to get the text messages in. Not calling Proctor and giving up his text messages would be a huge, I don't think they would ever do that. But who's to say that they don't get that in through one of Proctor's goons that he sent the messages to? They can still be authenticated through that guy. You can prove it's Proctor's cell phone number. I mean, there's other ways to do this. And if you get all that evidence in about him and you just don't get into the other stuff by confronting him where he denies doing anything, if they wanted to, I suppose they could just make the argument that, he was alone at this time and how can you trust him? If it were me, I would still call him if the DA doesn't, but they may think about it differently based on the way they're seeing what's happening with the jury and just how flat the so-called big evidence for the DA is falling. I mean, it does feel flat.
We had a question about whether the defense would be allowed to, and I want to edit their question because they're asking whether or not Morrissey's video will be allowed to be used by the defense.
No,
I don't think the defense is going to want to even go there with that. I mean, do you?
No, well, I can tell you this: if they're, literally and figuratively, if they're trimming the fat in this case, then they're not going to want Morrissey. And jokes aside about, again, no pun intended with that. But if you are seriously streamlining this case down to 4 days, something with Morrissey, that's way on the fringe.
Exactly.
And it's, by the way, as a lawyer, that you want to do that. You want to call him and do all that. And, your own meathead analysis in your own head is going to say, how do I do that? How do I do that? But when you take a deep breath and think about it, what their goal of the exercise here, which is to have someone who they strongly believe is actually innocent, have her found not guilty, you focus on that. And, that kind of stuff, if they're trimming the case, that kind of stuff would go. And I don't think it would be coming in anyway.
It seems like if it's a shorter defense, that's probably a sign that it's a strong defense. Would you say that? Would you?
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly things that they would want to establish, but also they're not committing to anything. I mean, you still have to see what does the DA do. So, again, this whole thing about, to go back to, like, for example, Jennifer McCabe's Google search, I would definitely keep that female trooper, Prince is her name, I think. That's one I want. I want to call her and talk to her about her interview of Jennifer McCabe and have her say, that's what she told me. And, at this point, will the jury necessarily literally remember its impact? No. But at the time of the summation, when they quote what McCabe's testimony was and what the testimony of the trooper is, they will. So, I think you'd still want to do things like that. I think you definitely, you have to have your Celebrite expert, right? I mean, that you can't give up that kind of stuff. I think you definitely want a medical examiner to say that these injuries may very well be consistent with a fight, dog bites, all of that. Beyond all of that, I'm not sure that there is other stuff that they want to do. I mean,
the
look,
experts, the three experts. So you use them.
Of course, the accident reconstruction people. If you're trimming the case, the kind of people you're not calling are the Rosado brothers. Remember, whatever we were calling them.
Lapolito. Yeah. Yes, Rosado. I love that. Yeah.
You've been paying attention. Wow. Stuff like that. You would just say, I'm not getting into that. And I think they're just looking at the jury and saying they want to go home. And this is bad. It's June. It is the beach season. It's summer. It's apparently hot as hell in the courtroom to the point where the judge is yelling at people saying either speak up or the AC is going off.
Yeah,
Even-
what about that? Like someone said, why can't they just put a freaking microphone on Adam Lally? Like
That's
one of
right.
those lapel pins. Like,
Fix the tax.
can't we
It's
get with the times
1800s.
here? Is that possible? Do courts ever do that? Do they like? How do
I
they
mean,
deal
look,
with this?
well, usually you just don't have to tell lawyers who by nature are loudmouths
Loud,
and blowhards to
Alan
know.
Jackson doesn't have that problem.
No, well, no. I mean, I don't know why he does that, but they need to do something because the last thing they should be doing is threatening the jurors to, that we're going to turn off the
You
air
got to cut your AC off.
because
I mean, she looks
Lally,
like it's like Total Recall when they shut
Yeah.
the oxygen off.
I
Keep
can't
these people
imagine. They
out.
must be getting so mad at Lally if
Keep
you're
these
a
people
juror.
out, Mike.
You're like, I'm going to lose my AC because of you guy, because you can't raise your voice.
yeah, no, it's
It's a
not
small
good.
courtroom too. I mean, you should be able to hear everybody. The courtroom is about the size of a freaking Matchbox car.
I don't know what it is, but I think that the defense is ready to just end this as quickly as they can. And they must feel very confident about what they're seeing. And they have something. I mean, there was something today at the end of O'Hara's testimony, at the very end, where they asked him about 6 or 7 very specific dates if Proctor did something and gave you this. There's something there, obviously. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they've got some stuff that you'd have to think is cooking just based upon some of the things that they're doing. Not every question is designed to get a bombshell answer at that moment. You play the long game, you lay the breadcrumbs, and then you hit later. And they've demonstrated that they've done that many times, in this case prior, where they've just kind of, if you remember, they never confronted Brian Albert with the texts that they had. They waited. They went for Matthew McCabe because he was the weaker one. I mean, that was in hindsight, that was a great move. That
Right.
worked out perfectly. And so things like that. So they've probably got a lot coming.
And some of the witnesses today, like this is a good one. John Barron says, I was expecting Jason to cross Hartnett about failing her proficiency test. Do you think that he didn't because he didn't want to undermine that she didn't find blood or tissue?
Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, Lally kind of, for the first time in one of these situations, kind of popped the balloon himself, asking her about some of her examinations and having to get reworked. So it was still out there. But also, what is she saying that hurts you? I mean, sometimes, as tempting as it may be to humiliate someone, you have to ask yourself, is there a reason? Why do you want this witness not to be credible? She basically says, you know what? I didn't even test for DNA.
Yeah.
I want that testimony. She says, I went all over that car with the exception of the roof and looked, and there was nothing about blood or tissue. So why do you want to beat her up? Why do you want the jury to know what she is? You can still say it in summation about the way they took the dog samples and all of that. But I think when you get what you want, what's the point of just beating her up for the sake of beating her up? I think also she was credible in her demeanor. I think she was professional. I think she wasn't trying to be shady in any way. Didn't she also do to Lally what the IT guy did, saying, what is this? Once again,
Yes.
that's twice now.
Yeah.
In 25 years, I'd never seen it happen once. Now, in the span of 4 days, I've seen it twice in the same case.
And so she basically, I mean, I think she was helpful for the defense. That's the bottom line. Like, why bully her? There's no reason to. It's absolutely,
I take away from her, I guess if you picked a few key points, I mean, there's probably a lot more, but there were kind of 3 things that really, or maybe 4, I guess now I'm piling them all up, that really jumped out. And in no particular order, this whole fiasco with Proctor holding the evidence for 6 weeks before she ever saw, I mean, a bloody wet shirt. I mean, what now again, why wouldn't you want that shirt tested for DNA, not dog DNA, human DNA? Who knows what's on? Maybe you'll eliminate other people. Maybe who beat him up could have been on that. Maybe they didn't want to know. So maybe he wanted that evidence to be kind of tainted before he gave her that. So, but that's a big thing, you know, that they linked to Proctor. There's one hair, which may or may not be human hair, and is apparently a hair made of Gorilla Glue because it doesn't move, except when you're in the Sally port, which is crazy. Same issue with the glass. I mean, I think the glass and hair kind of go side by side. But at the end of the day, she said there's no forensic evidence on this car that relates to any human being, not just John O'Keefe. And somebody could have tested for DNA in the blood, but nobody did. So I don't know why you would attack that as much as just say, thank you very much and get her out of there.
That's right. Now, you've been on a million shows now since like the last week. You've been on Mazza Media last night, right? You were on Mazza Media?
Really?
That was
I think he
unexpected.
yeah.
Actually, the joke was I had it on in the background because I wanted to listen and hear Mazza and Olivia. And also, I like the idea of Mazza's voice. It's like listening to a baseball game on the radio. It's just this very...
I love it.
And I was just kind of fading in and fading out here and there. And then the next thing you know,
you were calling in. So you called in last night to his show, and you've been on a million other shows. What are some of the shows? Like, what are your favorite shows that you've been on lately?
I like them all. It's fine as long as there's no kooks. I don't, even if people agree or disagree. I'm happy to talk about these things. So I went on that Surviving the Survivors one, which I think I'm going to do again tomorrow, by the way, with different people. And I thought that was fine. People were telling me that people were very open-minded as they were listening to it and changing views. And then they were just piling on the retired FBI agent, which I thought he was a nice guy. He's got an incredible resume. I think he said something regrettable just in terms of demonstrating general law enforcement bias. But I thought they were a little rough on him. And so then I went on, Collier Landry, who's an interesting person, by the way. I actually enjoyed that. He's got a hell of a backstory, if you know it, where his mother was killed by his father. And as a 10-year-old kid, he told the cops that, my God, my father killed my mother. And I don't think they believed him for a period of time. And then he ended up testifying against his father, who was convicted of murdering his mother. I mean, horrible stuff. And then this weekend, I agreed to go on Turtle Boy.
How was that one? That was the big one. You broke records on that.
That was fine. It went as I expected. I didn't, look, I'm not a fan of all the language describing certain people, but he did that after I left. So I appreciate that. But I thought it was good. I mean, he certainly knows the facts. He had some other people on who seemed pretty well informed, and it was good conversation. So
I watched some of it, and I could tell people loved it. Like, there were some people that whatever, but people really, I could tell they enjoyed that episode.
Yeah,
I watched the whole thing. I watched the whole thing start to finish. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even supposed to be watching that night. I had other plans, and I still watched some of it.
You went to Kowloon's, Mike. We know you went to Kowloon's.
No, I didn't. But I had other plans. You know how it is.
Are you eating Saugus wings?
Saugus wings.
You're always eating the buffalo wings, Mazza.
Yeah, I know. Not tonight. Tacos tonight for dinner. So.
Tacos, good.
Taco Monday instead of tacos.
I just had the nachos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So we got a lot of comments, a lot of people commenting, a lot of questions. If you want to post a question, you can definitely do so right now. Mazza, do you want to say anything special about this today? Anything we left out so far?
Well, I just, one of the things I thought was alarming was Maureen Hartnett, forensic crime lab representative for the Massachusetts State Police. She was kind of a little bit unsure when she specified who took her samplings. And it kind of sounded like she submitted it to the Canton Police Department. Then she was asked about the Massachusetts, Michael Proctor, actually, specifically. And it was just, I didn't like her answer. I didn't feel like her answer was very, I understand it's been probably a long time, and I get that. But I wasn't too satisfied with that answer. I thought that that essentially the chain of custody I found very concerning. And I thought Alan Jackson did a great job in, out there today, just basically constantly pushing back on that chain of custody, consistency of investigation, keeping of evidence, maintaining of evidence. I think there was something about a Q-tip that was discussed, or a swab or whatever that was discussed, and just kind of maintaining the integrity of that and what the procedure is if, say, it fell on the floor, what they do. I did like the answer that they gave, that they would just kind of note it as, evidence that was tainted. But I was kind of disappointed we didn't get Yuri today. Yuri and the bleep 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 last name. I was hyped up for that, and I know we had it on good word from very reliable sources, many great people in this movement that have great sources, and knew that he was going to get called today, and we were shocked that he did not. We had Kevin O'Hara, Maureen Hartnett, and Ashley Valliere. I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody else, but essentially at least 3 people today that went, and he was not one of them. And that was kind of a little bit disappointing. And now we got no court tomorrow, so it's Wednesday where that will pick back up. But I was a little disappointed not getting to see.
I think I understand why. I mean, I think they're
Mm.
kicking the can down the road, avoiding the decision until they have, in their view, the best evidence before them to decide which one of them or which ones of them are we going to call. And because it makes no sense. These witnesses all should have testified about a month ago.
Right.
Why you would call the DNA type people or the criminalist type people before the cops, who would explain how we secured the car and it was not tainted, and then we left it in the Sally port and protected it, and then we called in the criminalist. I mean, they're doing even when they're now getting to what we call the, maybe murder but not really phase of the case, they're once again doing it all out of order and in a way that makes no sense. I mean, the jury should know when the criminalists and the DNA people come in that the car has been secured properly, everything's been done, we know what the evidence is, we have confidence in everything that you've been doing, and you don't. And what you end up with is the end of a long, or most of the day, I know she wasn't the last witness, but just a boring, grueling, unbearable day.
Yeah.
And then the last thing the jury learns about through Hartnett is that Proctor, we just listened to you talk about the holes in the shirt and the blood and this, and it turns out that Proctor was just holding on to this evidence in location unknown from January 29th to I think he said March 14th. That is, honestly, this guy's going to get fired for probably 10 different reasons. There's clearly something going on with this guy. There is no way that this experienced investigator keeps bloody evidence in a homicide case in the back of his car for 6 weeks and then drops it off, to have testing done. That just makes no sense. He can't be that dumb. And if he's not that dumb, then he has to be something else. And this is why, when everybody tries to say, oh God, you're conspiracy theorists, you're doing this, you just go where the evidence is. And at some point, you don't have to check your common sense at the door. Sometimes the evidence leads down a real dark and dirty path. And that's what it appears to have done here. There's just too many incidents of Proctor and others, including civilians, McCabe's and Alberts and all that, doing things that don't make any sense. And the only logical explanation for what they're doing is because something really shady is going on behind the curtain. And to me, it's obvious. It really is.
We got an attorney in the comments who ran for district attorney in Bristol County. She almost won that campaign too against an incumbent. A lot of us want her to run again. She says, funny, the witnesses all mentioned Karen's name today.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
In what sense? They
actually, instead of saying the defendant, they said Karen Reed.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, look, I'm happy to criticize Lally for everything because he deserves it. You've heard me say this. He's the worst big case prosecutor I've ever seen in my life. But prosecutors are trained that once the defendant is identified in court, to have her referred to as a defendant. It's just a petty prosecutor thing. I did it because that's how we were trained to do it, to try to make her look less human and more perpy. So that never offended me when Brian Albert was calling her the defendant, and he's a police officer witness. He's trained to do that. They're all trained to do that. So that didn't offend me too much. I didn't notice that they were calling her. Who was calling her Karen today specifically? The cops?
I know at least one of the women did. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure
think
which
it was.
one.
I think it was Maureen Hartnett.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
but
mistaken.
she's just a scientist. I mean,
Right.
she's not a civilian. She works for law enforcement, but she's not that type of law enforcement. So I didn't notice it one way or the other, but I haven't been offended that they've been referring to her as defendant.
This made me laugh. I started laughing when I read this one. My favorite Bevism so far is, did she ignore you? To Higgins about Karen at the waterfall. That was hilarious. When she jumped
You
in.
get caught up in the soap opera.
Did she ignore you?
God,
You can answer that. You can answer that.
he was just a terrible witness for so many different reasons, and
Terrible texter too.
terrible. I mean, you could laugh at this, but
I know.
a lot of people think about a lot of bad things about a lot of witnesses, including the Alberts, the McCabe's, and the Higgins. But Higgins is in some ways the big loser here because he just sounds pathetic. He looks pathetic. He looks sheepish. He's like, I wasn't getting ignored. I didn't take it that way. I wasn't looking for romance. I was looking for sex, and that's not the same thing. And I'm doing this with dumping my garbage over here. I mean, this guy's a federal agent for 15 years, and as the reward for being such a dope, as we talked about previously, right now he's the leader in the clubhouse for federal charges for lying. Yeah, I'm not saying it'll happen, but he's definitely the leader in the clubhouse.
This one, Kristen is making a comment about the blood going down the shirt again, which we had just talked about earlier. She says, doesn't that indicate he was upright as he was bleeding? Seems powerful.
I more than that he was upright, which may be also true. To me, the bigger thing was, and I didn't think about this in that much detail, it just kind of hit me as it was happening. It's the front of his shirt. The bloody head injury is on the back of his head. And
Right.
You're not going to bleed. If you're going to bleed from a gash in the back of your head, then I don't understand why the hood is just not saturated. I mean, the hood is right there, like I'm wearing right now. I mean, that hood should basically be collecting
all of it. Yeah.
I don't want to get all graphic, but congealed, thick blood. It could be brain. I mean, look, all that nasty stuff. It could happen, and instead, there looks to be much more blood on the front. And people have referenced in the past to the vomit. That doesn't make any sense. How where the vomit is located. Basically what, on his underwear or whatever. I mean, how does this happen?
Right.
Based upon what they're claiming happened to him.
You know what? We have Shannon McMahon. She's in the green room. I think she wants to make a comment and say hi to Attorney Bederow. I'm going to bring her up. Let me get the super chat off there. Hey, Attorney Shannon McMahon.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little early. I couldn't help it.
Oh,
I was watching, and I'm sure Mark can attest to this, watching someone else talk about the legalese. It's like I've got 10,000 notes right now.
Yeah.
I've got a ton of questions for Mark. Like I said, I know I'm early, Mike. So if you want to boot me off and bring me back at 8:30, I'm happy to do that. Whatever is good for you.
Yeah, just go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so practicing in Bristol County and Plymouth County and Norfolk County, I've been in front of Bev. So I know I'd posted something about mentioning Karen's name, and as a former prosecutor, absolutely, I agree with you, Mark. Like you're designed to, you're trained to mention them as defendant. You
drill it early.
You drill it. I think it's hysterical that now today is the first day out of all of the people to be calling her Karen Reed are the scientists. Like it's such a hard swing when you have the kids calling her the defendant, and now you've got scientists calling her Karen Reed. Clearly, Lelly's paying attention to the fact that essentially the first 2 weeks of this trial, everyone talked about Colin Albert, and the second half of this trial has been about Proctor. Everyone's looking for when does Karen Reed come up. And I thought it was kind of an attempt by Lally, and I'm with you. I'm never going to trash another prosecutor. I think it's I don't think it's the greatest performance I've ever seen in my 12 years of being a litigator, but it's up there. But I still think at least it seems like he's still in the fight.
You're nicer than me. I don't want to criticize just for the sake, like gratuitously criticizing someone, but I have to call a spade a spade. He's the worst I've ever seen for this kind of case. He has no passion.
Yeah.
He has no personality. He's making these noises. I mean, today with the Jesus Christ, and he has no cogent argument. He has no, the manner of presenting evidence. There doesn't appear to be much strategy. And that office as a whole, I mean, my God, give them a lifeline. What are these other prosecutors doing? If they're not going to at least shuffle the papers and hand them the exhibits, why are they there?
It's brutal. And honestly, coming from Bristol County, and I know Mike had told you, I ran for Bristol County DA against what I believe to be an extraordinarily corrupt DA, and shares a lot of similarities with the Norfolk County DA. In fact, I think they co-signed something together, which doesn't shock me even in the least. But the overall lack of passion, I just can't wrap my head around. It's almost like he's a bit bored, and like in timeout. Like, I've got 4 kids, but it's almost like he's in timeout. Like, I'm doing my time. I'm sitting here. I'm doing what I have to do. But I mean, I kind of feel bad for the guy. As a prosecutor, even as a prosecutor, even doing murder cases, you're still answering to someone else. And I think the buck stops with Morrissey 100%. This is Morrissey's call. This is his employee. Lally he's not making 250, 300 grand a year. He's making 100 grand a year. His entire salary, his entire social life, everything about him is on social media. It's all over the press. Everyone's calling him a terrible lawyer. I can't imagine where you go from here. And to do all this for a guy like Morrissey is mind-boggling.
But that's why I think you're a nicer person than I am. I agree. Obviously, the DA makes the calls, but at the end of the day, this guy has to go home, look at his family, look at the public, and say, what am I doing here? And what he's doing is presenting a case, which I've said this before, Mike, when we first started talking about this. This is, in my view, immoral. If nothing else, if these people want to twist themselves into a knot with like pretzel logic, convincing themselves that she did something, that's fine. But as lawyers, you have to be bound by, do I have a provable case? And if the answer is I don't, then you shouldn't be doing this. And before I want to feel sorry for him, he marches in there every day. He does this. He didn't disclose evidence that the defense could have had all this time. They didn't do any real investigation into any other suspects that maybe would have led them in another direction, maybe not. So, I mean, yes, Lally is the useful idiot for Morrissey, but he's doing this. So, I mean, he's trying to send someone to prison for the rest of his life when he has no chance of doing that. And what a real ethical lawyer, in my view, should do is tell the big man, I'm not doing it. And you're right. I understand he's a hack. He's got no prospects, doesn't want to lose his job. I get it. But the answer is not to say, then I will be, your bag man and walk into court and humiliate myself in the service of the crown. And just, the expression I used for him the other day, again, I'm not being very nice, but his demeanor, it's like he's the guy, time to make the donuts. He just shows up every day, half awake, and just punches the clock, goes home and comes back.
Yep.
Does sound like a dial tone. I'm sorry. It's all true. But at the end of the day, he may very well he's not going to put someone who may very well be factually innocent in prison. And if he's trying to do that, then I can't have any sympathy for him. And people always ask me, he's not tanking the case. There's no way he's tanking the case.
I don't think he's tanking the case.
No, he just has no case.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a great lot of skill, but there is no way he's trying to lose. He may not be emotionally invested and project confidence in what he's doing because he knows at the end of the day, this is going south. He certainly doesn't look like Jackson and Yannetti, who are doing what lawyers are supposed to do, which is tell the jury in that kind of I'm looking at you way, I believe what I'm doing. And I know you know that I believe it. And you're going to remember that. And I'm sure they do. But I don't have any sympathy for him because what he's doing, in my view, is just disgraceful. He should know it's wrong. If he thinks she's guilty, keep those thoughts privately. But if you have a case like this, knowing what they know, knowing what the defense knows, I don't know how they can possibly send him into battle every day. And the only thing he's going to do is potentially expose himself in the office to the other stuff going on. Because at some point, when there is an obstruction and corruption type investigation, they're going to want to know what the DA knew. And if you knew these people were lying, how could you put them on? Because at that point, you could accuse them of suborning perjury. And this is a mess. And I want to feel sorry for him, but then I go back and basically say, what happens if he wins? Who do you feel sorry for then? Certainly not.
No, I 100% agree. Like I said, I mean, before I was a prosecutor, I was a defense attorney. Now I'm a defense attorney, but before then I was a judicial clerk for Superior Court in Bristol County for 5 years. And so I've seen murder trial after murder trial after murder trial, and I've never seen anything like this ever. Like, nothing even close to this. I've never seen a prosecution lay out a case the way that this prosecution has laid it out, completely on defense right off the bat. At some point, even I believe it was last week, at some point, and it was such a minor little thing, but Mark, you know as well as I do, jurors love the minor things, the little nuances. At some point,
hey, my favorite show is Columbo of all time. The little things.
Yeah. At some point, Lally had said, would you quarrel with that? And I actually almost spit my coffee out because it's such a Jackson and Yannetti statement. In my 100 jury trials that I've done in my life, I've never said that phrase. The fact that you started your case with playing defense and then you got lost because you kept getting objections that were sustained and you were left with nothing else but to take the defense's phrase. I mean, it was just, I actually spit my coffee out. I was laughing hysterically. And again, that's mean a little bit, but
you're getting meaner.
It's comical that you're just playing catch up. It's like watching, the NFL versus third grade. I've never seen anything this polar opposite in terms of craft skills of litigators.
Oh, yeah, well, the talent gap between the two sides is boys against men. But the funny thing is, what Lally took the cheese. They made this big deal about third-party culprits, and they got the DA all excited. We can't have that. And then they get a ruling where the judge, well, you can try it, and then we'll see where it goes. And so what does Lally do as a result of that? Oh my God, I need to make sure that none of Alberts and McCabe's are accused of anything. And he forgot that there's somebody sitting there every day in the well next to the lawyers, probably thinking half the day in her mind, why the hell am I here? Not that I want to be here, but I thought at least if I came here, they would talk about me a little bit. And
that kind of circles back to what I was talking about earlier, because like I said, in the beginning, it was all about Lally playing defense on this third party culprit. And if you know anything about a Bowden defense, you don't really need the third party culprit. Like just go for the Bowden and put the energy, make the prosecutor spend energy on the individuals. At this point, the jury has now heard more about Colin Albert and Michael Proctor,
right,
as well as Yuri Buchanan, more than they've heard the name Karen Reed.
Exactly.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. I wish someone would actually just go through, like somebody with time would go through and just do a count of how many times the two words
that's
Karen
the prosecution
Reed
witnesses too.
named.
And it's all prosecution witnesses. It's like when
that's
Alibi McKay brought it up about Colin, it just pointed the finger at him.
A prior statement about the defense, 4 days. I don't even know if they'll go 4 days. At this point, I'd do a mic drop. Go ahead. Oh, they didn't want to put their lead detective on? I'll use that in my closing all day. I mean, would I like to use it? Absolutely. But, you know, like Mark said, it's a cost benefit analysis. You know, do you bring them up? You've got them only on direct. You can't use leading questions. So, you know, I mean, it's you really got to think about that. And at the end of the day, this is a human being's life that we're talking about. So it's a big decision. And I agree with Mark as well about I don't think there's any way that they call Morrissey. Because
I don't think
I think it gets sidelined and they don't need it.
Exactly.
There's been a public outcry about the DA. And I think that's
enough already.
That's done. I don't think that there's a need to present it in this trial while they're doing a fantastic job of showing that this woman did not commit a murder.
Yeah, I think for Proctor, the decision will primarily come down to, or at least a major thought process of theirs will be, is there another way to get those text messages in? Those texts have got to come in for a couple of reasons. One, because they make, when you heard those about, you know, looking for nudes, I think she should kill herself. Don't worry about this guy. He's a cop. He's good. You know, I'm searching her phone. I almost fell on the floor. I couldn't believe that
I couldn't believe it either.
But from a practical standpoint, they opened on that, and they opened on that hard. And they have been making a huge deal out of Proctor, as they should. So at some point, I think you've got to get at least that out. And even if you end up calling him, if the DA doesn't, that's probably worth a good 15 minutes alone in an hour and a half summation in a case like this.
Yeah.
To basically say, ladies and gentlemen, this is appalling. Okay. This is the guy who built the case, and they know, just like, you know, they know, and they hid him from you because they know, and they didn't want you to hear boom, 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 boom. And I don't know how they can go forward like this. It's just.
Now, Mark, do you think that given this particular Judge Canoni's record throughout this trial, and I'm saying just specifically with this trial because I've actually practiced in front of her, and I think just on this particular trial, do you think that she would be amenable to allowing the defense, to treat Proctor as a hostile witness on direct?
No, not initially, but I have a feeling. I mean, I assumed that it would be Jackson who would handle.
Me too.
Although, by the way, Yannetti could do it fine. I'm just the way they're.
I'm in jail. I'm calling one of them. I promise you. After the past 4 weeks.
So I would assume though that it wouldn't take long to get under his skin and get him defensive and evasive to the point where, you know, they would ask permission. And for the non-lawyers, that's just an excuse to cross-examine him instead of asking him non-leading, you know, Lally type, what if anything would you do differently type questions.
Of course, even on direct, he's leading like crazy.
Yeah,
because he can't get it done.
I don't think she would. I mean, I think would say, he's your witness, give it a shot, and let's see what he says. And the problem is, you're just going to have to listen to him talk if he wants to talk, because you're going to have to ask him open-ended questions. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be that worried, because what is this guy going to say? I mean, at some point, what is he going to say about, forget the text messages and all that stuff. I mean, what the hell is he going to say about, I had a bloody pair of clothes in the same evidence bag and I just held on to it for 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
And
just for 6 weeks. Just a small period of time.
Well, you know what? This is the kind of stuff everyone was laughing weeks ago and said, what do you mean there's pig DNA? And the dog DNA to me is a non-thing, because that was discredited.
That could actually be from the dog. So that pig ear is a huge thing that people get.
Totally. No, but I'm saying a different point. This guy held on to these clothes for 6 weeks. Okay. Would you put it past him at this point to go swab a pig? No. I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, what is he doing? Why would he do that?
Or just a ham sandwich. I mean, throwing the wrapper of a Subway sandwich in the back seat.
Big BLT, for goodness sake.
All I can picture is like these clothes in the back seat of a car, like a soccer mom's car.
What possible reason could they explain that the lead investigator held on to the bloody clothes of someone they're treating as a murder victim for 6 weeks before he hands it over to the, the lab type people. There's literally no explanation for that. None. They have violated so many protocols of preserving evidence, chain of custody, securing crimes. I mean, that in and of itself, even if they weren't corrupt and your argument was they're just stupid, this would still be a not guilty case because all of this evidence, the taillight in particular, which comes from a 7-hour abandoned crime scene. Are you confident that, you're just going to trust these guys knowing everything else, Not,
And I gotta
not
be honest, I will say, what I thought Alan Jackson, one of the more poignant points he made today, and again, same with the repetition that kind of Lally did with making witnesses repeat the name Karen Reed, even if it was just looking at a document. Alan Jackson just kept going over the phrase chain of custody. So even though the objections were sustained, and so he couldn't actually get the document into evidence, he had them say, and he said chain of custody so many times. And jurors don't ignore words and repetition like that. And you know that as well as I do, Mark. I mean, like what the repetition that, like, if you can sneak it in, you can sneak it in. Keep going in. It's not about the answer. It's about the question. Keep talking about the chain of custody because it is the breadth of the case.
It is.
I mean,
it's what people remember too. Like
That's
in
right.
radio, they talk. My girlfriend did radio for 30 years. Repeat, repetition, that they do the same thing in radio.
Yep.
So it drips through. Like it definitely, that's how people pick it up. If it's repeated, they pick it up. That's why you want to hear the same song on the radio that you've been listening to for 30 years. It's repetition. It works.
Yep.
So, yeah. Mazza, do you want to say anything too? I want to make sure that I'm not ignoring you here.
No problem at all. I had a question for Shannon. Shannon, you said you have experience in court with Judge Canoni as the judge. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a defense attorney now, and I practice in Norfolk Superior.
Are you able to elaborate on any positive or negative experiences that you've assessed? Well,
so I mean, and I'll be far kinder to the bench than I have been about the prosecutor. Because I was a clerk for 5 years as a judicial clerk in Superior Court. And one thing I can tell you is that I think some of Judge Canoni's behavior is somewhat one-sided. I think that happens, especially when you've got essentially out of town, big shot superstar lawyers like Alan Jackson. I mean, David Dunetti is local, but still he's kind of a hot shot lawyer. So there's a little bit of, in my opinion, a little bit of bias towards that. But I think that the way she's running things, especially over the past 3 weeks, is very typical of what you would see from a Raj. So she's the regional administrative justice. So, for every week that this takes longer, that's weeks of backlog in that court, and that's her job, is to run this. So I noticed in the past, maybe last week a bit, she started kind of being a little bit kinder in her phraseology towards the defense. But this week for certain, she is harping on Lally about keeping his voice up, about being, screw this. We need to get this done. Right. Because I can tell you firsthand, before COVID even happened, I was clerking in Bristol County, and the flu, the H1N1, I think that was what the bad flu was back then.
Yeah.
That came out, and we shut down the courts for, I want to say it was like 3 business days. It had never been done before. And it took us almost a year to recover from that. Now you've got COVID. Right. So there's no end in sight on when the backlog is going to uptick from COVID. I've got trials in Norfolk that are certainly not getting reached this year at all. They're not, they're just not, because of things like this. So she's, I think the social media aspect of it is looking at it like she's extraordinarily one-sided. And while I do believe she's somewhat one-sided, I don't think it's extraordinary. I think a lot of it is based on her job as the regional administrative justice, who's trying to keep this thing locked and loaded and done in the time frame she told those jurors.
Do you think that she's been more one-sided in this case in comparison to any cases that you've been in her courtroom for? That's all I want to ask that question. Yeah, yeah.
I've seen her be
Sorry about that question, but I had to ask.
I've seen her be harsh to both sides of the aisle.
Okay.
Seems to be like she doesn't have any I don't know what the swearing rules are here, Mike, but she doesn't have any tolerance for bullshit.
Okay.
Like at all.
That's fine.
So I've seen her yell at plaintiffs' counsel, prosecutors, defense attorneys, on both sides. Lack of preparation, I would say, is probably something that is unforgivable in her eyes, which is why I was a little bit surprised by her being a little bit more towards the state on this one, or the Commonwealth on this one, because clearly there's been no witness prep at all.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I like your answers on that, Shannon. It sounds pretty good that, I think sometimes a lot of us have a concern that there's a bias, and it's kind of in some ways relieving to hear you kind of say, well, based on your experience, you can kind of say or attest to that it's not. And I think, Mark, you might have elaborated that a couple weeks ago on one of the earlier shows we were all on together, that you didn't think that her behavior as a judge or candor as a judge was anything out of the ordinary. So it's kind of very relieving to hear that again, not only from Mark, but from you as well, Shannon, based on your, personal experience with her.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Massachusetts litigators, it's not as big a bar as you think it is. So, everybody's been on one side of the aisle before. So there's usually some sort of collegiate behavior, which I love being a lawyer in Massachusetts. I love being a litigator in Massachusetts because of that. I especially love being one from Bristol County because we're even smaller and closer knit. But I've seen, like I said, I've seen her be just really tough for almost what I could see as not a huge reason, but I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. Like I said, I'm clerking for every single Superior Court justice in Bristol County, in Suffolk, and two in Suffolk. It can happen. It just can. Yeah, you don't necessarily always know what's going on in their mind. You also don't know, and Mark can definitely attest to this one, you don't know exactly what happened in some of those pre-trials. So a lot of this was done on camera, but I would strongly say a lot of the fighting, the cat fighting, was done either at sidebar or with the judge directly off the record. And that's usually where someone pisses off a judge.
My biggest criticism of her isn't her kind of apparently cantankerous, but demeanor sometimes to either side. My biggest complaint, and you've heard this before too, is that there's no method to her madness or rhyme reason with her rulings. I mean, when she takes these hearsay objections or other things, I swear to God, I feel like she's flipping a coin in her mind. It's like, no, he can have that, or
time I'll go with you.
And no congruence.
That kind. I mean, I just don't think there's. I mean, she's not unintelligent. Clearly, she's smart, even whether you like it or not. But I don't know if she's just not focused on what's happening with these objections. It just totally appears to be arbitrary in what I'm going to let them ask and what I'm not going to let them ask. And that's from a lawyer's standpoint. And I mean, I don't know her, so I don't really care. I don't expect to be there in front of her anyway. And just be consistent. She's
6 months later.
Yeah, she's just not. That's all I'm saying.
All of a sudden, 6 months later, Mark, you're there in your courtroom. Like, I never would have saw this happening.
I thought about writing a check to the Massachusetts bar and caving in and trying to move around a little bit. But yeah, we'll see.
It's fun. We'd love to have you. I love your insight.
Look at that.
God knows
really
I
do.
go
I've
back
been
home.
hitting up Mike and being like, I love this guy.
We just need the right
sorry for
case.
Massachusetts that we lost you and we had you and we let you go.
Well, it's been a long time now, but
Yeah.
no, it's
Like I said, I've only practiced here in Mass, and I have the utmost respect for the bench, especially giving my resume and working for them and seeing the work that goes in. The majority of them really care. It's probably why I have a tough time believing that a judge would be so clearly biased. I'm also not an idiot, and I can see certain things, but it would be very hard for me to believe that she's somehow involved in this. It's like, Mark, when you've
No.
got criminal defense clients who are like, you're doing this because you're in cahoots with the Commonwealth. And you're like, do you understand I went to law school and I took the bar exam and it's a large amount of money. I'm not willing to throw it away on this case. Like, it's one case. It's not happening.
She's not part of any. I mean,
She's
she
not.
may be.
There's
She
no
may
way.
be rulings that people don't like, or attitude sometimes is a little off-putting. Maybe she does seem to skew prosecution, but as we said earlier, Mike, they all do. That's what judges generally are, with rare exceptions. But she's not part of the frame job here to the extent people strongly believe there is one. She may have been a bad draw for this kind of case. There might be certain judges, certainly I can think of a few in New York, who would get up to the prosecutor and just look at them and say, "What the hell are you doing? You've got to be kidding me."
Speed it up. Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
right.
but also just like based on the evidence, say, how do you expect, what are you doing? Have you spoken to your supervisor? I mean, I think the judges, I mean, you can imagine New York City or some of them anyway, are a little more vocal.
Yeah, they must be like this, right?
They like to share their opinions and, move it along. Yeah, just but I don't think she's part of the problem. And I told you that weeks ago too, that she's not going to get in the way of what's going to happen here. I mean, she can't stop this train from going over the cliff where it's, inching closer by the day. And eventually it's just going to fall over and this case will be over.
Excellent. I don't know. We're like 8:17. Would you have final thoughts tonight or anything else you guys want to bring up tonight?
Mark, I had one more quick question for you. Like as a litigator, as a defense attorney, as long as you have been, do you find yourself still somewhat looking for the aha moment from the Commonwealth, given that there was an indictment and you still have some sort of like belief that, yes, you can indict a ham sandwich, but you've got to believe somewhere that something must have happened for this to have not been, not having arrests from the feds yet, and for a grand jury to indict? Like, I'm still waiting for something. I thought it was going to come today, and it left me lackluster.
So my view of this was, I completely understand why in the days after this incident that they would have focused on Karen Reed. I don't think that was a ridiculous assumption by the police, but the interesting thing is police by nature are suspicious of everyone about everything at every time. And in this situation, they just tunnel visioned over to her and just like left their brains on the other side of the room as they were dealing with her and didn't want to look at anything. The indictment never should have happened for the simple reason that they didn't close these other investigative holes. By the time, they should have known something with the Alberts or whatever. And if they thought that they could clear them, that's fine. But they never really wanted to know, did this guy ever come in the house? I mean, they were told the day it happened, but they also knew that he was going there, and they just never seemed to even attempt to look into any of that stuff, even as they learned more evidence. So if the indictment is not bad enough, then over the several months and year and whatever it is now, as all of this other stuff starts coming out, I just don't know how in good faith they can possibly do what they're doing. But for me, I'm only recently familiar with the facts. I was, for the last year, more interested in some of the Morrissey shenanigans and the lawyer stuff. That's just because, to me, the Norfolk the Norfolk County DA's office was, for me, very similar to what the old Charles Hines Brooklyn DA's office used to be in New York, where dealing with a lot of just horrible cases and horrible prosecutors. This is years ago. I mean, they had a wrongful conviction scandal in Kings County in Brooklyn that was just the way they were doing things. It really reminds me of Norfolk County. But once I heard the opening statements, I was pretty confident at that point that they probably don't have much. And then as this is going on and on, you certainly have to be willing to wait and at least give them the benefit of the doubt to some extent and see what do they have. But, that was going to be with the alleged statements that she made. That turned out to be a dud for the simple reason they're inconsistent and not reliable, because Jennifer McCabe is one of the worst witnesses I've ever seen in my life, ever. Then you thought, well, maybe it's going to be some of the forensic evidence, which slowly started creeping in today. And that turned out to be, for the most part, what you heard today. There's no biological material on the car, but we have a, Gorilla Glue piece of hair that flips when nothing's happening, but not when you're going 60 miles an hour in a snowstorm. And, we have Solo cups full of blood that nobody thinks are worth DNA testing.
Right.
We have the magic piece of glass that, can also survive on the car. We have
while
Proctor,
traveling at the same trajectory as a 6 foot tall, 250-pound man.
you have Proctor storing evidence probably, under his bed and doing God knows what. And you sit there and say, so that's the forensic evidence. Okay. So it really is going to come down to, for the way the DA looks at it, the taillight, because there is no forensic evidence, apparently, at least none to suggest at this point. And so it's going to be the taillight that they found 6 or 7 pieces of. I think we were told 45. We'll see. Maybe that's coming later with the Proctor nonsense. But either way, even the 6 or 7, it's polycarbonate. I know we talk about this every time. How do you explain that? How do you explain the 5 o'clock video, which shows the car apparently having that wraparound light in much better condition than when it's in the Sally Port in the Canton Police Department? And this is before they yanked it off. That wraparound light is stripped clean. It's gone. And there's one little tiny shard of red glass above it, or red polycarbonate, whatever. So at this point, what's next? Oh, it's going to be that Jen McCabe did not make the Google search until 6 the next morning. Good luck with that. I mean, we've beat that to death over the past few weeks. And so what is that going to do for them? Probably nothing. Then it's going to be what? A medical examiner who's going to say, I don't know what the manner of death is. So let's just call it, undetermined, and some kind of trauma and hypothermia, but I can't tell you whether it's even from a homicide, except I can tell you it's not from a homicide, except for one exception. He didn't get beat up to death. That we know, which is ridiculous.
Never heard that.
No,
That's
and
all they can tell us.
No, that's the police. Most
Planting.
likely that's Proctor in the autopsy saying, what about this? What about this?
More planting.
It's absolutely against
kind of like
You're not
subliminal.
supposed to be
Yeah.
in there.
It is a form of planting. I mean, it's not literally, but it's suggesting. And
Exactly.
now they've put this medical examiner in a position to have to defend this and explain that. So you keep looking and you keep looking. And then you say, okay, they try this trick with the dog, and we're going to show you that there's no canine DNA. And then you find out that, they had a HeartNet, the one we heard from today, basically take a shirt and just swab it and send the swabs in. And let's take her and Proctor's word for it. But then you learn something else today, which even if you didn't believe it was corrupt on the part of the one who swabbed it, that this was in Proctor's custody for 6 weeks beforehand without explanation. And then you haven't even gotten into
It all goes back to Proctor. It's all corrupted by Proctor. That's where it's the problem.
He is the albatross around the DA's neck, and they're never going to let the defense is never going to let them know about it. And if they're too gutless to call him, they are going to get humiliated in a summation like you've never seen before.
Yeah.
We keep having this comment about this. What is this? Did anyone else catch the photo of the new clear O piece? I guess they're saying it came from a
Taillight
Jeep.
piece.
Yeah.
Taillight piece,
What do you think
yeah.
about this? Any comment on this? I
I'm
don't know what
not.
you're talking about.
I'm not enough of a car guy to
Yeah.
get into. But what you might expect is this: if the DA was really gonna, at this point, pin their whole case on the taillight pieces, then why don't they have an expert from Lexus or something like that
Right.
to, at a minimum, say that light is consistent and try to jigsaw puzzle it and plug it in for whatever pieces they have, and at least render some kind of opinion that fits and has got to be hers. And they're not going to do that just based on everything else you see them that they're doing.
There you go. Sean on the golf, I think, nailed it too, like about the taillight. Like you talked about it today, Mark, about the backing up and just the taillight itself. He nailed it months ago. Like it was so ahead of the game. It's amazing.
The other thing that is interesting about the taillight, if I understood it correctly, because this was mostly before I wanted to take a nap, it wasn't that boring yet. That came later. Didn't what's his name, O'Hara? Didn't he say that the light pieces? I think there was a good 6 or 7 of them or something were recovered right by the sneaker. Right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
The sneaker was upside down, which is fine, leaning against the curb. In other words, the street. So the taillight stuff is essentially near the street or in the street. I think he said in the street because it wasn't in the heavy snow that the plows make that goes 3 feet high and makes really compact, hard snow. It was in the regular snow near where they had plowed in the street. And so if that's the case, and that's where John O'Keefe's sneaker is, that's where the so-called impact is. How is John O'Keefe 10 feet away in the lawn next to the flagpole?
With his phone underneath him and a
With-
drinking glass underneath
There you
him,
go.
which by all intents and purposes would actually defy all laws of physics.
Sure.
I mean,
Like they just
None of it
weigh
makes
less. If they're
sense.
hit with
None
the
of it.
same
are
power.
they saying that he got launched? I mean, for 20
How does he get
miles?
launched to the side of the road? I mean,
Yeah.
he gets launched off the
No
road.
damage off the
3 feet
car. He
onto
got
the
launched,
grass.
but there's no
It's, you
damage
know,
in the car.
he gets hit by the side and goes flying 3 feet
Yeah.
out. It's so impractical. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
absolutely impractical.
No, I think, and again, none of us are medical experts. None of us are accident reconstruction people. That comes later, as if it's not piling on enough. But, if you have a little bit of common sense, you can at least kind of scratch your head and visualize how this is playing out and say, this doesn't make any sense. What is this guy Lally doing? And why is he selling me, this bag of goods? Is there nothing you can do to demonstrate that this is not more probable than not, but that you can prove this to me beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty? I mean, my God, the jury instruction you have in Massachusetts is it's so much worse than anywhere else I've ever heard. It worse for a prosecutor, that the idea that any of these jurors are going to be sitting there and saying, I'm okay with this. I'm not going to have to pay penance for this. I'm clear to a moral certainty that she did it. And then they're going to get 12 people to do that.
Sure. Not at all.
That's not, trolls aside. And if you're listening and all of that, that's not going to happen.
No, it's definitely
Grant
not.
Smith said it would.
Yeah.
Yeah, the foremost expert on this whole case, Grant.
It's a towel. A towel.
Resident towel, yeah.
I'm new to Twitter. I literally got on Twitter because of this. I've been following this since a year ago, April. And so I begrudgingly began on social media.
Put on your body armor. You'll need it.
Yeah. Get your block button ready because you're going to need
I'm
that.
a defense attorney and I'm a mom of 4 teenage kids. Trust me, I've got body armor. And I ran against a DA who's as deeply entrenched as Morrissey is.
Wow.
Yeah. And you were calling him out for his BS, like a
I
law
was absolutely
scandal.
calling him out for his bullshit.
There are some of these people, though. I mean, because now, as I said, I've discovered the blog function. There was some guy last night. I don't know if he was posing to be someone else or was being serious. He was professing to be some kind of law student or anything. And the discussion was, there was discussion about Wendy Murphy, as there always is, and one of her greatest hits about how, if Karen Reed doesn't get on the stand and invoke the Fifth Amendment, that the DA will then call her as a witness. This is just that exactly. And this woman was a former prosecutor. So this guy responds, and he's like, although it would be rare, and I've never seen it happen. He's like, subpoena her, so I thought he was like a nice kid. I'm like, it's not how it works. You cannot do that to the defendant. And I said, if they tried to do that, there would be a mistrial immediately. There would be seeking sanctions up to and including this and that. And he kept coming back with saying, well, I think I do know a little bit about criminal procedure. And although, he said the parties would do is work it out. They would, when they get the subpoena, I'm like, that's it, block. I can't. I just
can't do it. Yeah, I can't deal with imbeciles today.
And if you're listening, I'm sorry, but it just came a point where like they taught me the block feature, and now it's like,
I mean, isn't that the whole thing? You have a right to remain silent.
Yeah.
If
you notice, actually, Judge Canoni has continuously
we all know that.
said,
not just lawsuits, everybody. So stupid, some of these people.
And Massachusetts is the stricter of the states. The burden is extraordinarily high for the prosecution. I can't even wrap my head around, when I was a prosecutor and even as a defense attorney, when you get a jury of 12 and what is there, 16 seated right now?
17, I think.
17?
Yeah.
And do they not know who the alternates are? I mean,
they don't.
They don't.
That's a matter
afterwards.
They don't think it until right after.
You know which ones are the alternates in New York.
The ones who are sleeping.
Right.
All the way on the end. They're the last. You literally pick alternates, like specifically, and
there's a, believe it or not, in Mass, there's actually a barrel. I kid you not, they still use it. There's a barrel that they use, and they put all the numbers in, and then the clerk on the record pulls out.
Yeah, they wheel raffle. Yeah, they use that for jury selection too.
But as a prosecutor and defense attorney, when you've got a trial that's this long, some lawyers get carried away with the legalese and the intricacy of certain things. You've got to dumb this down to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
So, I was a bartender for 25 years, probably even longer than that. I put myself through undergrad. I put myself through law school. When I had my kids, I was a bartender. When I taught at UMass Law, I told anybody who wanted to be a litigator, go bartend. If you can't get a story across to 6 strangers who are there on purpose, paying you for it, and if you can't get them to like you, go into corporate law. Because at the end of the day, it is dumbing it down to the lowest common denominator. Bingo. This should have been so simple. The opening statement should have been about how Karen was upset about something that happened in Aruba. Stop naming every single person that you're going to call. Stop telling me what the credentials are. You want to cater it to the lowest common denominator.
That's right.
Not the highest common denominator. And Lally lost everybody in that. And it was such a missed opportunity for the Commonwealth to capture this, at least try to make some sort of case about maybe this was, a relationship that was going bad and that's how things go. And there was alcohol and everyone was drunk and accident happened. And because of her actions after the accident, we're charging her with this. It could have been a 5-minute opening. Yeah. And he would have gotten more points than the dragging it out and just being so finite and detailed when you don't need to be. You're being a litigator is being on Broadway. If you don't have a captivated audience, you lose.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody remember?
Valley would not sell on Broadway.
No, he would not.
No, not at all.
Or anywhere. You wouldn't sell at the local pub.
He's the equivalent of watching paint dry, that's for sure. And he objects all the time. Do you think it's Bev's is it a standard of Bev to not require an explanation for objections? I mean, he's objecting all the time, and she has this, you know, do you think that's her standard to not require, you know, an explanation for objections at all?
It is. It's standard practice.
Okay. Oh, it is.
So
Okay.
once a jury is in the box, objections are essentially understood.
Okay.
If there's a question as to why it's done at sidebar, but that is
Okay.
extraordinarily common practice. And
Okay.
Mazzamedia, I gotta ask, is it because I've been painting all day that you mentioned the paint drying? Do I still have like paint all over me?
No, no. I mean, your walls are nicely painted. I mean, it's kind of getting shadowy in the background now, but your walls look nicely painted. No, I just equate them to watching paint dry. When I see Adam Lally, it's just it's so boring.
Oh yeah.
But no, there was no reference there, or no in
Yeah, I'm
joke.
like,
No.
well, I've been painting the deck, so
Okay.
it's been taking me about 4 days now, and I'm
Oh
covered
wow.
in red
Good
oak
weather
stain.
for it. No
Yeah, that's
rain.
good weather.
Where
Yeah.
does he go from here when this is over and he skulks out of the courtroom and they're going to ask him to comment and he's not going to because, you know, that's what DAs do. They don't want the rank and file saying anything. Where do you go? Like dog catcher, misdemeanors, lead?
Be good with dogs? We could hire him.
Wasn't he in white collar crime before this?
Oh, yeah. I thought he did. What was it? Traffic. I thought it was traffic tickets or something.
Is that his expertise? Because this was a alleged car accident.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't honestly don't know much about him. I tried to figure out. I know he did. I think it was a motor vehicle homicide that he's done before, but. And Mark, you know this as well as I do. I mean, like a lot of prosecutors who try big cases, their names aren't mentioned because the DA's name is named. So you will find that there are some prosecutors who have done a ton of murder cases who just their names aren't in the paper because it wasn't important.
Well, unfortunately for Mr. Lally, his name
that ship sailed.
You know, it's the famous quote. What it was? "I'll make you famous," and
he's famous.
He's going to be famous with this, but not in a good way.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be bad.
We got a question about. Do you think today, with Brian Albert being outside, shows another motive of getting rid of his phone, keeping his eye on the investigation? Are jurors paying attention?
Are jurors paying attention? Well, that was kind of early in the morning, so there's more hope than certainly later today, where I imagine I wasn't, as you know, I don't see the jurors. I would, if all of us can't stay awake, I don't know how the jury can, and especially because it's hot as hell in there, apparently.
It's hot as hell down there.
So,
hot as hell.
But as far as him going outside, another motive, I don't connect it to his phone. In terms of keeping an eye on the investigation, I think that's exactly what it sounds like. What are you guys doing? And then he just pirouettes and goes back inside, which I think also, I don't know how they're going to argue it. I know that these lawyers are going to be very sensitive to putting on tinfoil hats and falling for the cheese and as opposed to what's in front of them. But I suppose one could make an argument, if you wanted to, that when Albert went out there, you know, he was part of the plan, if you will, with Proctor and Tully, and he just wanted to say, are you the guys that are sent to do the job? And okay, and then he just goes back in. Would I make that argument? Maybe not. I don't know that it's necessary, but it is a little weird that he just came out, wanted to know what they were doing, and had no curiosity, given what you know about that time period. Okay, so this is on the 29th, right? When the search happens later in the day, and you do know that from the text messages that came in through Matthew McCabe, just a couple days later, these guys are sending Matthew McCabe out like, you know, Scooby-Doo looking for clues and reporting back about, you know, they're digging, but they're in
front of the agent house. The agent house.
Don't worry about it. It's the Asians. I mean, my God.
Yeah.
But, and they're talking about, everyone knows about, you know, tell them the guy never came in the house. Exactly. But also there's the other stuff as part of those texts where they're talking about, oh, you know, we need to know, Miss Kerry telling them, the cops, she's telling everything. And these guys clearly are obsessed with knowing what's going on in an investigation that ostensibly does not involve them. And they're victims of a tragedy in the sense they have the unfortunate fact of owning the lawn where, you know, Brian Albert, your brother police officer, literally same department, died on your lawn. So for him to come out and just say, "Are you the guys?" and turn back in and pay no attention to it doesn't fit with the stuff that he was evincing, and they were all evincing a couple days later in that text chain. So it is interesting.
Got a lot of super chats tonight. I want to thank everyone who's been sending the super chats. I always have to apologize. We can't read them all. We try to put them all on the screen. If anyone's mad at me, I'm very sorry. We do our best we can. I'm just throwing them up all on the screen now, just in case I miss one. What are our final thoughts, Mazza? What do you got for us tonight?
Well, I thought today the most intriguing part of the whole day was essentially just kind of seeing John's shirt. That was something I was really wondering about seeing. We got to see that. We got to analyze that. And I thought that the holes on the sleeve were very consistent with what I've always thought are dog bites. I know Brian from LTL had broken down in his post essentially a dog bite, kind of like a mold of teeth that he had in his post where he compared it to the teeth marks in the shirt. And it's all very consistent. It looks like he was attacked by, it looks like someone threw the hoodie to a dog and it just started mauling the thing. It's just so beat. Obviously down the middle is obviously the EMT cutting with the scissors there, but it's like I've always thought. The taillight, you look at the shattered taillight that they showed again today. There's no way that a vehicle backing up, hitting a human being is going to cause that kind of shattering. The thing looks like it was hit with a sledgehammer about 2 or 3 times. It's shattered so much. And again, it's inconsistent with Karen Reed when she's leaving John O'Keefe's house to go search for him early that morning, when that taillight is not only mainly intact, but it's still lighting up red. Then you see the image of that footage, image of that taillight that they showed in court today, and it's shattered to bits in certain areas. It's so inconsistent. There's just no way you're going to back up a vehicle. You would have to back, and to get that kind of damage, you'd probably have to back it up into a brick wall or a cinder block or something. It's just not going to be caused by hitting a human that's just going to basically fall down to the ground, and that's about it. So, and again, the wounds are not consistent with the person that's been hit by a vehicle. So the vehicle's taillight is not consistent with hitting a human being, because that's practically impossible. And then his wounds are not lining up with what being hit by vehicles like. He looks like he was attacked by a dog and he was beaten to death. And like David Yannetti said over a year ago, looks like he'd been in a fight with Mike Tyson. And that's where I rest.
Thank you so much, Mazza Media. Shannon, attorney Shannon McMahon, what do you got for us?
So, Mike, I'll be frank with you. You know where I stand on corruption with the district attorney's office. Clearly, we've talked many times about why I ran. And I think that what I hear the most now, being a new member of Twitter, is, or X, whatever we're supposed to call it, is that no one can believe that corruption like this exists. And I think what I wanted to get across is that seeing it firsthand, especially with, and I know you've had Eric Mack on your show before, the Anthony Hardin murder is clearly very near and dear to my heart. It's one of the reasons I did decide to run. And you can see it very, very, very clearly in that case that corruption isn't what you think it is. It's not a group of people sitting in the 5th floor at a round table discussing what they're going to do. And it's about one person doing a favor for someone else, and that person's in a uniquely powerful position. And from that, it stems and it just blossoms. And you've got maybe somebody who's not as competent in the next step. And then you've got someone else who's trying to cover up for that lack of incompetence. It's not a well thought out plan, but once it's done, there's a cover your ass philosophy that takes over, and that's what you see what's happening right now. I just want to put people's minds at ease that it's not what you're thinking. It's not, like I said, it's not this round table that's happening upstairs with these guys in, $1 million suits and having this planned out, well executed thing. It's, hey, a kid who I hired, who's a family member of mine, shot a kid within being in the house for 2 minutes. let's just keep their name out of it. It's that simple, and it's a ripple effect. And that's what you saw with the Anthony Hardin case, and what you're seeing right now with the Anthony Hardin case. And it's exactly what you're seeing with the Karen Reed case. It's these microscopic things that I'm covering for you because you're my friend, because, you know, and you can pick what you want. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if we'll ever know what happened that night. But my genuine belief is that there were not a bunch of people that sat around and pre-planned this. But it's, you know, somebody in the state police clearly said, I know these people, I'll vouch for them. And that in and of itself is corruption.
We got 2 more questions that came in for you, Shin. Real quick. What is your X handle on
Swear to
Twitter?
God, I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, we'll find it. We'll
I'll look it up.
Hit me up with it, and we'll share it on our Twitter so people can find her. All right.
No, I was
Number
actually
2,
perusing. I was
yeah.
perusing on X, and I found at McMahon 4DA. Is that yours?
Nope, that
Okay.
was my former one
Campaign.
when I was during the campaign, which I clearly did
Okay.
not know how to use.
Okay.
And the second part of that is people want to know, are you going to run again?
Yeah, that seems to be the question of the day.
Good political non-answer.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, Mike, I feel like you and I have talked enough where you'll find some humor in my response. I like to keep the old man on his toes.
There we go.
There you
You
go.
know,
Let's-
Keep 'em guessing.
he's running, or apparently he's running. He's holding fundraisers, and he's never done that before. Losing to essentially a non-public person, you know, 40% of your vote when you're a Quinn in Bristol County, to a no-named person, because I know how to work. And God knows we did. We worked 19-hour days. I had a team of 6. He had $300,000, and we still got 40%. So I'm going to make him just keep
Sweat it.
questioning it.
Yeah, I love it.
That's what
Good
he should
political
do.
strategy.
Let him sweat it until you know.
I promise when I make up my mind, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah. Now, another questions keep coming in for you. We got to be quick though, because we got to wrap it up here. But people want to know your thoughts. Do you know any? Because you're from the same area as Special Prosecutor Melo. Do you know Ken Melo?
I know Ken very, very well. So when I was in undergrad, I actually worked for Ken Melo. I was paralegal for him and my then brother-in-law. They shared an office. My brother-in-law is a fantastic attorney. He's one of the best. Ken Van Colen. If you know, he's done a million cases. He's an exceptional lawyer. He's unbelievably well respected amongst the bar. And yeah, I know Ken Melo.
What do you think about him in his recent actions? I mean,
I don't really know what to think. At some point, I think I got flabbergasted. I can't understand anybody ever purposefully taking a case against the First Amendment in Massachusetts, period. I just can't. And to go gung-ho at it, I'm not going to speak about it in great detail because I don't know enough. I know what's been publicly filed, and certainly the court cases that I've heard and watched. I will say that the communication with the alleged victim, the repetitive nature of that, I thought was a little bit suspect. It's certainly not anything that I think is appropriate as a prosecutor. There were certainly times I had certain victims when I was a prosecutor that I spoke to, but I usually tried to keep a victim witness advocate with me. There was, I think, one time that I actually spoke to this person, but it was because she was a young girl and was kicked out of her home and she was homeless and we were trying to get her shelter. But aside from that, you usually want to kind of cover your ass and have a victim witness advocate with you at all times. The cell phone calling with the alleged victim, I thought was a little bit suspect. But again, I don't have all of the details of it. I don't have the back knowledge of the details that they know. So it's speculation at best. You know, I've seen Ken try a bunch of cases. He did a bunch of sex cases when I was there. I think that I think maybe he's just done.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking on it. Attorney Bederow, what do you have for us? Final comments tonight.
So one thing to follow up on what Shannon said about how corruption works and how it doesn't always get thought out. And it often happens. It just becomes a snowball that goes downhill and gets bigger because you've crossed a line and there's no turning back. And these people start thinking the best way out of this is try to punch our way out, get through it, and maybe we'll get away with it. And what they do is they make it worse and worse. But, you know, in this particular situation, I agree. Somebody knows, you know, Proctor, state police, you know, he'll deal with it. And I think he got over his head real quick and it wasn't thought out. And that's why this is so stupid. And that's why this whole, you know, let's do the girl with the car dirty and blame it on her. It's not a well thought out thing. And that's why his text messages, they're so important to me. That is a stream of consciousness about this whole thing. When that guy says, I wish she would just kill herself, that is him saying, what the hell have I done? We've started this. And now I know she's going to end up getting arrested. I've started this process. I'm beholden to, you know, Brian Albert. And, you know, you've heard what Higgins said, not that it's evidence in front of the jury because the objections were sustained, but, you know, Chief Berkowitz is scared of him. He beats up this other I mean, people are scared of him. And so they go in and then there's just no turning back. And that's often how corruption does work. It just falls like that and they're kind of screwed. The other thing, so I've always thought, you know, be open-minded to the extent you can, even though I have strong feelings that this case is disgraceful and shouldn't have been indicted, but that you, at least if the evidence were to change, you know, go where the evidence goes. Just don't be so locked in like some of these people that you know are, that I'm willing to listen. I don't think it's going to work, but I'm willing to listen. So I thought today was really one of their last puncher's chances, like, you know, a Hail Mary, just kind of see if you can land.
Yeah.
And that for them, it would have been the car. In other words, the forensic evidence, something that they're going to wrap their hands around that's going to impress people other than like the coffin daffers of the world who just hear it and just believe it without, you know, using any common sense about what else is going on. But all they did today was make it sound like more of the same. I don't know if they necessarily got any worse with like the search and finding the taillight, but when the jury hears that it's a 7-hour abandoned crime scene, that it comes from Tully and Proctor, that you're not starting until it's night, even though you're getting notified, and they're telling you literally, don't do it yet. How do you not start wondering, given everything else you know? And then when you finish the day with, we don't have any blood, we don't have any DNA, we don't have any this, we have a magic hair and all this other stuff. If that's their way of saying this is our, you know, best and last, I don't know where they're going here. And, you know, at this point, what is the Google search going to do for them? Even if they were to try to make an argument that, well, maybe it didn't happen at 227, because that's not good enough. They have the burden of proof and they have to win on the Google search by a knockout overwhelmingly. They have to literally have the jury believe that there is no chance that all of that happened at 227. There is no chance that McCabe deleted all of these messages. There is no chance that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert are butt dialing and literally calling each other back via butt dial. I mean, I think that should be said every day. You have this when people say that this sounds legitimate. A butt dial that was allegedly called back 1 minute later with a butt. So, but laughing aside, they need to win all of that overwhelmingly in a knockout and convince the jury there's no chance that any of that is valid. They're probably not going to be able to do that. In the best case scenario, a jury might say it's possible. And if it's possible, and you don't have the burden of proof, you win. The same way, well, it's possible that hair may not be John O'Keefe's. It's possible that hair stuck to the car, but somehow moved while it was in the Sally port in the span of 2 minutes. I don't know. So, I thought today was a chance for them to at least try to do something positive. And they did, but it was one little thing, and it really wasn't that big a deal. We can stop talking about the belt because the belt was there the whole time.
Yeah.
But you wonder if Proctor had properly vouchered the evidence and turned it in on time. Might people have known this earlier? So I still don't see anything that they can possibly do that's going to have this end well for them. And I think, give it a couple of weeks, whatever it is, I just imagine she's going to walk out a winner.
I hope
I think
so.
even if they found out that Karen, if they could prove Karen did the 227 Google search, I still think there's reasonable doubt.
Yep.
Yeah.
Never mind if they could prove that McCabe didn't.
Yep.
I look forward to seeing how Lally in a summation is going to deal with all of these issues. I mean, how does he even address the Proctor problem? How does he even address, you can have integrity in the crime scene, even though it was abandoned, the taillight, the polycarbonate, the Google searches, the butt dials, the relationship between Proctor and the Alberts of Canton, how, I mean, they're like this semi-royal family of Canton. This is so pathetic. How is he going to deal with all of that and say there is overwhelming proof beyond a reasonable doubt that what happened was she ran him over? Never mind those accident reconstruction guys behind the curtain. I mean, it really is a Wizard of Oz thing to me that he's going to have to say is never mind the man behind the curtain. None of that matters. Just look at me. And I don't know why they're doing this.
Yeah.
I just don't see how they can possibly think that this is going to end in anything other than an absolute train wreck for them.
Yeah. It's a total disaster.
I hope so. I hope it's a disaster for them because they deserve it.
Yeah,
I want to thank you for being here again. Attorney Shannon McMahon, Mazza Media, Attorney Mark Bederow. You guys are great. Thank you so much. People
I found my Twitter handle.
Yeah, what is it?
It's Shannon 654-80171. And if anyone wants to tweet me and let me know how to change that into something somewhat reasonable to remember,
you're definitely going to want something better than that. Yeah.
Send us a message on Twitter so we know who you are.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. Mark, it was a real pleasure to finally meet you. Mazza, I'm watching your stuff all the time.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I know this was kind of a last minute thing and I wasn't supposed to be on until later.
Oh, great. Thank you all for being here.
True litigator. I couldn't help myself. I was like,
thank you all for being here tonight.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good evening. Free Karen Reed.
Great night. Free Karen Reed.
Take care.
You too. Bye now. So, I'm Mike Crawford. This is the Young Jerks. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. We got a lot of super chats. I want to thank you so much. I tried to get them all up there. I know people get mad when I don't. I'm so sorry. I try. Sometimes it's tough to read the comments. You don't want to interrupt the conversation too. And sometimes it's something we already answered too. That also happens. I want to thank Laura on Venmo. She sent $25 tonight. She said, thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Very generous of you. $25. I really appreciate that. Also, Deborah sent $20. I think that was last night. Thank you so much, Deborah. And I think I thanked James last night and Suzanne last night, as well as Gary. Thank you so much. I think I did see something on the cash out. Let me just check real quick. Yes. Joan on the Cash App sent $25. Thank you so much, Joan. She says, thank you for all you do. Thank you, Joan. Very generous. Also, Bridget Neary sent $5. She said, for Mike and Mark, the Young Jerks, for all you have given to Free Karen Reed. Thank you so much, Bridget. All right, that's it tonight. I want to thank everyone. Oh, wait. We got a huge show tomorrow night. Sean on the golf. Sean McDonough will be here at 6 p.m. I mentioned Sean tonight. The Taillight. Sean's been right on so much stuff, unlike Kevin. So, Sean McDonough, if you don't know, he's a retired supervisory special agent with the DEA. Retired, 30-year career in law enforcement. Grew up in, Boston area, graduated from Canton High School. He's a decorated law enforcement. He got the highest award for the drug enforcement agency that you can win. He's going to be back on the show tomorrow night, and I'm wicked excited for it. He's been on the show a few times. I think probably, I'd say 5 or 6 times now, but it's been a little while. He's got his own show going through the motions, which is amazing. He also does Dylan's show. So he's got a lot going on. If you look at going through the motions, his YouTube and the Young Jerks right now, we're both at 19,000. We're both at 19,000 followers. We're both going to cross 20,000 probably in the next day or two. So let's get Sean McDonough going through the motions and the Young Jerks to 20,000 followers as soon as possible on YouTube. We're going to do a show. Let's do it tomorrow night when Sean's on the show. That's it. We're going to do it tomorrow night. Sean and I. It's like, I don't know if I call my brother or my father, but I'm the guy known for cannabis, and he's the DEA guy, and we love each other. I love Sean McDonough. I can't wait. Can't wait to have him back on the show tomorrow night. It's going to be so much fun. So let's get us both, Sean McDonough, going through the motions, and the Young Jerks to 20,000 by the time our show ends tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Make sure you're there. I want to thank everyone. I don't know what's going on the rest of the week. I've been slammed. I'm so busy with the dog business. What time is it? 9:02 right now. You guys, I want you to understand, because so many people message me, contact me, hit me up, ask me for stuff. I'm working tonight. I started this morning at 7 a.m. It's now 9 p.m. I'm still working doing the show, right? As soon as I get done with this, as soon as I close it down, I'm running out the door to go to 2 other people's houses, to walk their dogs, to take out their dogs, to bring them where I'm going to be staying tonight. I'm still working tonight. Working around the clock. It will slow down. I can't wait till it slows down. It's my dog business slows down right probably when the Karen Reed trial ends. So my whole life is going to go from crazy to chill, and I can't wait. So if I don't get back to you right away, don't get upset, please. I'm not ignoring you. I just can't. I can barely book the show. The show is on fire, and I can barely keep up with it. I know I'm missing opportunities because I'm so busy right now. I can't respond to everything. So I just want everyone to understand that. Have some patience with me. I can't do everything all at once. So I got to go. I got to go walk some dogs tonight for customers. I thank you so much, everybody, for supporting us, streaming us, sharing it, donating. You guys are amazing. I've made so many new friends this year. We had our best month ever on this thing that we do. I'll see everyone tomorrow or the next day or whenever we're live. Tomorrow. Oh, yeah, 6 p.m. Sean McDonough. I'll see you tomorrow night, 6 p.m., everyone.